All right, let me show you how I caught over 120 pips on this GBPUSD sell. This is going to be a trade recap of what I saw that made me take this particular move. Okay, so this is GBPUSD on the weekly time frame. I'm just going to do a quick recap so that I show you where price is currently trading off of. The first one I noticed was this previous resistance zone, somewhere around this level, where price was trading from that I expected price to still hold because something that pushed price down in the past, by all things being equal, should still push price down in the future. So this was my first observation. Second thing I saw was, look at this. I'm going to explain or give you some explanation as to how market moves. This is market structure, right? Look at this from somewhere around March all the way to this year's May. GBPUSD was trending up. And what are the characteristic patterns we see in an uptrend? Higher highs and lower lows. Price kept buying. But then somewhere around here, we saw a change of character. What does that mean? Instead of price to keep buying and breaking structure to the upside, it broke to the downside. So this was our first change of character and a break of structure. But this break of structure was not as strong as I would prefer. Hence why I use this particular level as my confirmatory break of structure to give me a clearer signal that GBPUSD was selling. Okay, so there was a confirmatory break of structure here. You'll see that price returned into that particular level, somewhere around that doji candle you can see at that zone, and then it sold. It sold from that level. So from there, this is it, sold from there. Okay, so this has moved. But when price returned into that level, it left a couple of resistance. That is where price now eventually traded into. Okay, so while price also led with resistance, it also gave us a new break of structure. We use this, we could use this, and then left a level that price was going to eventually return into. So that's two confluences I was looking out for. Hence why I marked out all of this and used this as my key area for me to look for a sell on GU. If you also notice, I also marked out some levels on the lower side. We had a change of character here because this was a downtrend. Give us lower lows, lower highs continuously if you're going to hold. So this was a change of character when price traded above and a confirmatory break of structure. Hence why this was a key level we're watching for. Look at that, price returned into that level and it got from there. Okay, I also came all the way here. This is now our most recent price action where we saw a change of character, a confirmatory break of structure. I marked out those zones. I also went ahead to mark out this previous resistance that could act as support in the future. But let's go to lower time frame so we can see more data and this would be clearer. This would be clearer. Okay, so on a daily time frame, those are the levels that we had marked out initially that we're waiting for price to eventually trade into. You'd also see that I marked out a few on the upside as well. Look at that. So why did I take a sell from this particular level? We saw a change of character and a confirmatory break of structure. This was a POI. Another break of structure happened, which gave us a doji candle somewhere around here. Hence why I wanted to see price eventually trade into that level. Now, when price, this is a particular level where GBPUSD sold from, but I was still looking at price returning into that zone for us to sell. And when price returned into that level, I simply went ahead and took a sell on GBPUSD. And that's how I came about this trade that gave me or has given me over 120 pips. Let's go ahead and calculate that for this particular asset class. So to where price traded to 142 pips that GBPUSD has now done. So do I think it's going to keep trading lower? It is likely that it does continue digging deep. You see that I drew out some levels using this horizontal line where price might trade into to find support. So if price eventually trades into somewhere around 1.34361, then the support might be held. If not, and it breaks below, it's targeting this zone. But if all of these two horizontal lines get broken, the next zone it's going to be coming for will be where we had our previous doji candle on the swing that gave us our confirmatory break of structure. That is where you might trade into, provided these levels do not hold. I also took another trade on XAUUSD, but this entry was more focused on the 15-minute time frame, and I'm going to quickly show you what I saw. Look at that. I'm just going to go ahead to the 15-minute time frame because I've already explained the step-by-step process for the GBPUSD on the higher time frame. So look at this, right? Price kept doing this. We had our first change of character and a confirmatory break of structure. This is where we ought to have taken ourselves from all the way here, but I missed it. So the reason why I took this trade was a trend continuation pattern. I only waited for price to trade somewhere inside a liquidity level. Look at that. When price gave us this, it left a fair value gap around that level. So then when I saw price return into that zone, I simply clicked, took that bar, a sell on gold, and continued trading it lower. You see, so liquidity levels combined with market structure is why I took this sell. The same process I did on GBPUSD is exactly the same thing I do on other asset classes. There's then the final look on AUDUSD, which is the final trade that I took as well. All of these trades I've held from last week. So let's see what this is doing. So predominantly structure on AU. It's even better because now the trend sort of aligns. So predominantly we're on the downside. For those of us who use the Fibonacci retracement, so you'd see that if you flip from point A to point B, this is somewhere around 61.8 fib level, where the AUDUSD asset class was at some point. So I'll go ahead and delete that. Let's remove that so we don't get clustered. Now let's go on the daily for more data. On the daily time frame, there's something we call the major structures and the minor structures. Major structures still kept respecting movement to the downside, but if you look at the minor structures, you see that we had, sorry about that, you see that we had a change of character to the upside and a confirmatory break of structure, which price already returned into and traded off of. Okay, so why did I take this sell? Let's go to the 4-hour time frame. My focus on this was the most recent price movement, where price was currently headed to or coming from. Look at that. The same thing I showed you. We had a change of character, market behaved oddly, a confirmatory break of structure, hence why this place became a point of interest. It is even better when you see different things that give you more confluence. So you look for other blocks or doji candles or stopper shockers, depending on what it is that you call it. You want to look for that. There's an extra confluence. You want to see if it is a supply zone, a demand zone, depending on the trade you're trying to take. So that I don't just think it is everywhere you see a confirmatory break of structure that you sell from. All of those other things serve as an extra confluence in why we take our trades. Liquidity also plays a role. There are times that you'd see this happen. Look at this. Now let's zoom in. As an example, by the way, imagine that price came here, you'd mark this out as a point of interest, but price traded above and looked for liquid. This was a fair value gap that was left. So this can happen in some cases where you mark out a zone and you see a fair value gap right above your point of interest. By the fair value gap now, I'm solely referring to these three candles, candle 1, 2, and 3, right? This could have been a level that I was watching out for solely. Now, price could have traded above, tapped into that FVG and continued to sell. That happens a lot of times. But in this case, when price returned into that zone, this liquidity had already been tapped into. So that was why it was not a thing of concern for me. And I just took a sell from on that particular level. Look at this. When you come on the 2-hour time frame where you see even more data, you realize that I first took a sell from this zone, which stopped me out. And I waited for price to return into my second point of interest, which this just goes to show you that the market would fail sometimes. So it's not every time that the market will give you 100%. There are times the market will fail, but you see the times it does go our way, our goal is to milk it as much as we can. So this market failed us here, but thankfully my stop loss was not crazy. So when price returned into here, I made back my stop loss and extra profit on it. Risk management, guys, risk management. So price stopped me out from this level. You see why I took this as a point of interest as well. There's also another break of structure. But, looking at it now, right, I could have waited to see a clearer confluence around this zone to take that sell. But look, when price even broke through this zone, it eventually returned into that level and still sold from the place that stopped me out initially. So price has now sold all the way into a level that could serve as support. How did I come about this support level? It is the same thing that we did for the sell situation that we're doing for the buy. Price is selling, yes. However, price gave us a change of character and a break of structure. And when it gave us that confirmatory break of structure, that is now a zone that price will return into for it to now continue to buy from. So you mark from the upside, mark from the downside, and look for opportunities. So that's basically it for the trade recaps on AUDUSD, AUDUSD, XAUUSD, and GBPUSD. Collectively now, GBPUSD gave us about 142 pips. AUDUSD gave us how many pips? Somewhere around 89 pips, right? Okay, so this is already 200 plus pips. Let's look at XAUUSD. XAUUSD gave us how many pips? This has not closed yet, and it's already looking like it is reversing. But the good thing is I already took partials on this. This is now literally back to entry. But no, gold is a fast moving asset class. So we're not going to count this as part of it because it's not fully hit TP. Together, safe to say gold, the trades that has done what it's supposed to, that's giving us about 230 something pips thereabouts, which is an amazing trade. So yes, if you watch to this point, stick around. And my next video, I'm going to do a breakdown of how I look for opportunities in certain asset classes. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers and God bless.